In the netherworld of espionage, Henry Crumpton is legendary. He was deputy director of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center and chief of one of the agency's most secret divisions. He is known to U.S. presidents, African rebels, and Afghan tribal leaders by just one name, Hank. In interviews with Lara Logan, Hank Crumpton guided 60 Minutes on a tour through the shadowy world of clandestine operations. Among the many things she learned is that Crumpton has a unique perspective on the war in Afghanistan because it was Hank who was in charge of the covert U.S. response to 9/11.
The story will continue in a moment.
What do you make of where Afghanistan is right now?
It reminds me of a Greek tragedy. You've got so many mistakes, many of them inadvertent, like the burning of the Quran on the U.S. side, and you've got a feckless, corrupt government on the Afghan side. I am really more pessimistic now than I've been in a long time.
Hank Crumpton, now 55, spent 24 years in the murky world of the CIA clandestine service, including a year on loan to the FBI and a decade at CIA stations across Africa. We first met Hank Crumpton 3 years ago. That's when he agreed to return to Afghanistan with us and tell 60 Minutes about the capstone to his career as a spy. How the CIA forged a secret alliance with Afghan tribal leaders, and how fewer than 500 Americans, 110 CIA officers, backed by teams of U.S. Special Operations Forces, toppled the Taliban after 9/11. What were the orders you gave your men?
Orders were fairly simple. Find al-Qaeda and kill them.
Kofor Black was chief of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, and for a quarter century he was Crumpton's boss and mentor. He personally chose Hank for the most important mission of his life.
Why did I pick Hank Crumpton to lead the CIA team? Because we want to win. Hank's the kind of man you can bet your life on.
When a career CIA officer or someone like yourself says, Hank's the kind of guy you can bet your life on, you mean that literally?
Literally. This is not, working for a Wall Street law firm, dog eat dog and nobody dies. And we're talking where the life and the well-being of your colleagues are at risk.
The CIA was given the lead role in prosecuting a war for the first time in history, and Black promised then-President George W. Bush the agency was up to the task.
I said, Mr. President, by the time we're through with these guys, they're going to have flies walking across their eyeballs. This isn't a joke. This is a statement of fact of what's going to happen.
And he responded?
He asked me again to validate whether I could do this. And I said, Mr. President, there's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind. I knew our planning. I knew our people. I knew Hank Crumpton.
What was your first meeting with President Bush like? What did he say to you?
I sat down with some maps and walked through what our initial strategy was going to be. He asked good questions. At the end of the meeting, I remember we were walking outside. We left the building at Camp David, walking to the cars. President Bush came up. He put his arm on my shoulder and he told me to go get him. And I said, yes, sir, I will.
The world was expecting a conventional response.
They expected that we would not respond in any meaningful way.
Weakness.
Weakness. And the enemy thought the U.S. was weak. The last thing they thought is that we would drop commandos, CIA and Special Forces, behind their lines, and we would assume the role of insurgents and forge these deep alliances with these Afghan tribal leaders, these non-state actors, and in the matter of 90 days, subvert and overthrow the Taliban regime and kill large numbers of al-Qaeda.
Crumpton fears the return of al-Qaeda in force to Afghanistan if the U.S. withdraws too quickly. But he and Kofor Black believe the original American mission changed after the Taliban was defeated.
My mission was not to assure that little girls go to school in Afghanistan. My mission was not to establish, a legal system in Afghanistan. It was not my mission. My mission was to destroy Al-Qaeda, and to do that, we had to overthrow the Taliban.
That mission actually began 5 years before 9/11. That's when the CIA set up what became Hank Crumpton's special unit, tasked with finding Osama bin Laden.
From 98, 99, all the way up to 2001, the warnings were there.
So through the Clinton administration to the Bush administration.
Yes. We had extensive human networks in Afghanistan, Afghan sources that had been reporting on Al-Qaeda, on the presence of bin Laden.
But Crumpton says the Clinton White House didn't trust the CIA's Afghan sources alone, and they wanted U.S. eyes on the target.
So we were driven to look at various technical options, and we looked at a range of things. Long-range optics, they were too heavy, too cumbersome to get over the mountains. We looked at balloons. The prevailing winds would take those balloons to China. That would be a bad thing. We scrapped that. And then we stumbled across the UAVs, particularly the Predator. And sure enough, it wasn't long before we had the Predator in theater over Afghanistan, the Predator unarmed at the time. And our human sources took us to a village not far from Kandahar.
And what did you see there?
We saw a security detail, a convoy, and we saw bin Laden exit the vehicle.
Clearly.
Clearly. And we had, the optics were spot on, it was beaming back to us, CIA headquarters. We immediately alerted the White House, and the Clinton administration's response was, well, it will take several hours for the TLAMs, the cruise missiles launched from submarines, to reach that objective. So you need to tell us where bin Laden will be 5 or 6 hours from now. The frustration was enormous.
So at that moment, you wanted to kill him?
Yes.
But you couldn't get permission?
Correct.
He couldn't get permission to do anything, including allowing the CIA's Afghan agents on the ground to attack bin Laden's compound. That missed opportunity in the late summer of 1999 led Crumpton and his CIA team to figure out how to arm the Predator drone with Hellfire missiles. So the Predator drone strikes that take place in the tribal areas of Pakistan today are a direct result of what happened when you had Osama bin Laden in your sights in Afghanistan and no way to kill him yourselves.
It was a response to the lack of response on the part of the administration or DOD. So the handful of CIA officers that we had, in great frustration, we began the discussion of, okay, we find him again, we will have to engage ourselves, and we will have to do it right then, right there.
Crumpton pointed out, though, that the CIA was never able to get a Predator shot at bin Laden, even after agents shadowed his courier to the house in Abbottabad where he was killed a year ago by U.S. Navy SEALs. Is it conceivable to you that the Pakistani leadership did not know that Osama bin Laden was in Abbottabad on Pakistani soil, being sheltered there?
I would be surprised if some leaders, particularly in the military, were not aware of his presence there.
And not just not aware, but facilitated it.
Yes.
Even with bin Laden dead, Crumpton warns that Al-Qaeda and its affiliates, including Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, remain a potent danger to the U.S. homeland.
They still pose a threat. I'm particularly concerned about Al-Qaeda in Yemen, which is fractured as a nation state. The Sahel, if you look at Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, they pose a threat. And then Somalia. Those are the places I'd be concerned.
Hank Crumpton is one of the most seasoned and accomplished CIA officers of his generation. That's why, after his success directing the agency's Afghanistan campaign, the CIA chose him to become chief of its National Resources Division, one of the smallest but most sensitive secret operations of the clandestine service. You probably don't know this, but the division has covert CIA offices across the United States.
A particular U.S. company can provide cover for a CIA officer who's deployed overseas. A U.S. executive who's traveled abroad can come back and agree to a debriefing from the CIA. A foreign institution may have a relationship with an American institution, and that might be a pathway for the CIA to acquire foreign intelligence.
Doesn't that go against the public perception of what the CIA is tasked with doing? I mean, under your charter, most people think of the CIA's responsibilities as lying outside of America's borders.
Yes, I agree. I think many Americans view it that way. The CIA's responsibility in the U.S., though, is very specific. While inside the U.S., the mission is exclusively and totally focused on the collection of foreign intelligence.
So you can recruit foreign agents on U.S. soil?
Yes.
Clandestine CIA officers also run so-called technical operations against enemy spies in the U.S.
You can eavesdrop, you can bug, you can intercept their communications.
But you can't do that to Americans?
Absolutely not. Again, the focus of the National Resources Division is the collection of foreign intelligence that happens to be inside the U.S.
What about counterintelligence?
It's a critical issue. If you look at the threat that is imposed upon our nation every day, some of the major nation states, China in particular, very sophisticated intelligence operations, very aggressive operations against the U.S. I would hazard to guess they are more foreign intelligence officers inside the U.S. working against U.S. interests now than even at the height of the Cold War.
Hank Crumpton has written a book about his life as a spy because he thinks the role of intelligence is misunderstood, and the CIA has often been misused by presidents and policymakers of both parties. He wants to set the record straight. And his book, The Art of Intelligence, will be published tomorrow. In it, he tells how he learned about insurgency firsthand from African rebels. He learned about blood feuds from Afghan tribal leaders, and he learned that Al-Qaeda terrorists and enemy agents from North Korea all seem to share a particular weakness.
I never met a North Korean that did not like pornography.
Is there a lot that goes on in the world of espionage as a CIA officer that surprised you?
Every day was something different. Every day there was not only an operational judgment, there was a moral judgment. Is this the right thing to do?
For example, supplying porn to North Korean diplomats.
Right. Supplying porn to North Korean official to entice them to spy for America, along with money or whatever else it might take. Well, for me, the answer was yes, I was willing to do that.
He hasn't been a covert operator since 2005. That's when he became the coordinator for counterterrorism at the State Department, with the rank of ambassador. But we noticed Hank Crumpton still has the tics, the habits and reflexes of a man who's always aware of his situation, eyes sweeping the area and looking over his shoulder.
What makes a good spy?
I think that you have to have an intense intellectual curiosity. I think also it requires a willingness to deal with ambivalent situations, a certain degree of creativity, physical courage.
Are you a good spy?
Yes, I was a good spy.
Are you still a good spy?
No. I retired, and that was more than 7-8 years ago now.
They say you never really retire from the CIA.
Oh, I've retired all right.